if you think it's not going to happen to you, you're wrong. It could even be a disgruntled employee or a disgruntled, customer. You just never know where it comes from. And there's some really low-hanging fruit, like is it using a VPN or having a password manager? I mean, that whole idea that so many of us have 5 million passwords and they're stored sometimes just in a Google, on your phone, right? Some sort of memo is actually kind of scary. The fact that so many Americans and even businesses have the basic password, right? Make sure your people change your password. Force people to change their password. Something as simple as that can actually really aid exponentially.
Welcome to Plain Talk Cyber. I'm George Bakalov, your host. On this podcast, we're going to break down complex cybersecurity concepts into easy to understand language. So you, as a business owner, especially small, medium-sized businesses, you as a business leader can understand how to best protect your business, your data, your online reputation, your customers, everything that concerns you when it comes to cyber attacks and cyber protection. Stay tuned and let's learn together.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Plain Talk Cyber. I'm George Bakalov, your host, and today on the podcast, I have with me Gwyneth Borden. Gwyneth, great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
And Gwyneth I'll let her introduce herself and what she does, but I'm, in the little bit of a warm-up that we had leading to the podcast, just immediately knew that she was the right person to talk to about the issues that we talk about on the pod because she's someone that actually is aware of what's been happening. And there's a lot of people, Gwyneth, that are not aware of the type of issues that we'll talk about. So I believe you'll be helpful to people like myself who want to hear from people like you, but also business owners and leaders who haven't maybe experienced what you've experienced. So before that, give us a little bit of an idea of your background, your experience, and what you do with the organization you represent.
Yeah. So my name is Gwyneth Borden. I'm the founder and CEO of ReMint. ReMint is a debt recovery company that partners with financial institutions to recover delinquencies and help consumers rebuild their finances. A bit about me. I started my career in Capitol Hill. I've worked in the public, private, nonprofit sector for large organizations like IBM and for startups. And if that wasn't enough, in my spare time, I served on boards and commissions for the city and county of San Francisco, one of which included the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, which moves over 800,000 people a year. And it was over $1 billion budget with $1 billion+ capital plan. And so I was the chair of that agency also at one point. So I've had very diverse experience, both in my direct professional work and then the things I choose in my free time.
Well, that sounds exciting. I love the fact because you actually, from what I understand, you've moved at some, enterprise level, just sum it up as
Yes.
whether it's government or other organizations, but now you are in SMB world.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, being in debt recovery, that means we partner with financial institutions like banks, credit unions, other fintechs as well. And so that the bar is quite high because in debt collection, which is a nicer way of saying debt recovery, you have all of the sensitive information on a customer, right? You have their date of birth, their social security number, you have a whole host of information and people who are in a vulnerable state, right? Because they are in debt. They would be ashamed. They don't want other people to know it. So you've got the not disclosing to the wrong people just generally by law, but then secondarily, the opportunity for cyber attacks. Interestingly enough, there's a lot of, in this industry, sometimes there's internal fraud. There's other people that hack systems. Obviously, the credit bureaus even struggle in this area, and that destroys trust. And so the first thing, even though, when I was getting started out and I had nothing, the number one thing to me that was important was how to best steward the data of the financial institutions or and the customers, the actual consumers we touch. And so we actually work with a data vault provider, and that's a very affordable approach for cyber. The way that it works is that we have this data vault. Basically, you put data when you collect it goes directly into the data vault. It tokenizes the information. And so therefore, our core system doesn't store any PII. It lives all in the data vault. And that was a really affordable way for us to provide a really turnkey kind of solution that protects the data that we have provenance over. And then, of course, within our admin system, there's access for how much information, who gets access to what pieces of information. All the payments, of course, are tokenized. In fact, it was so funny because at the beginning, my CTO at the time had been also head of security, and worked in security even at Best Buy. And he had tokenized it so much. I was like, I hate that I have to click 5 times to find someone's name. I don't need to see a token. It's okay if I know their name, right?
Right, right. He went
You know,
the extra mile, so to say.
right. They went the extra mile. We also, of course, use like 1Password so that we actually make sure we're storing all the passwords in like a password vault. And we also have, our system is set up so that the CTO can shut things down, and we have control remotely over all the different computers in our network. We have a VPN installed as well. And so we've really taken, the precautions that weren't that costly actually to use a 1Password, to have a VPN. Those are all very affordable ways to actually be able to store and contain data, because I found from day one, people start reaching out to your employees and trying to, try to get things out of them, right? Right. It's amazing to me. You hire someone and like the next day they're getting some sort of like phishing email or text message. It doesn't take very long for those things to happen, but I do think it can be done pretty affordably. And, obviously the other thing you have to have is insurance policies, right? To help in that place. And so it's actually really interesting because obviously if you're dealing with data, you want to have a cyber policy, and the more guardrails and things you put in place, the more affordable cyber policies are.
Absolutely.
And so we have, robust training of our employees that we make them do every year to make sure they're on top of it. But yeah, I mean, people definitely get a lot of information that sometimes seems like, I'm like, if I'm asking for gift cards, I'm obviously not asking for gift cards.
Well, sounds like a simple guardrail you said, or safeguard, but actually, when you communicate it on a periodic basis, especially with, like you mentioned, new employees, so, is there a way, a process, a predictable and repeatable process where new resources would be onboarded, and part of that onboarding is going to be making them aware, hey, Gwyneth doesn't ask for gift cards, just so you know, right? Never, ever. Right?
Well, so I think what's hard in this world is the voice, people can spoof your voice if you actually had a call, right?
All you need is, from what I heard last, is like mere seconds, like, 3 to 5 to 10 seconds or so of somebody's voice, which is, I mean, you're on podcasts, I'm on podcasts. It's really not that difficult for someone to grab a sample of your voice and spoof you, or even now video spoofing is coming up as an issue. So, but talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned before, you've had, like I said, in my universe divides into two kinds of people, those who have had a cyber incident and those who haven't. And those who've had a cyber incident actually are the majority. But tell me a little bit about your firsthand experience that you've had, not with ReMint, but you have, am I pronouncing correctly?
ReMint, yeah, that's right.
ReMint, yep. Not with ReMint, but you mentioned in a previous professional experience you had a close first-hand experience with a major incident, and it sounds like it left a lasting impression on you.
Yeah. So when I was on the board of the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, we had a cyber attack that affected it was a malware attack. It affected about a quarter of our system. It meant that they actually demanded Bitcoin as payment. We did not pay, but it meant that our fare system and some part of the network was actually, disabled. So we had to
ransomware attack.
Yeah, exactly. And so as a consequence, we actually had to, for the weekend, we made it transportation fare for free because we needed to not have, they had access over that. So we lost the weekend of fares, and we decided to, luckily or unluckily, because our system is so old, we could easily restore from backup, right? From our backup systems and not pay the ransom, and luckily no personal consumer kind of data had been compromised, right? So that was the other factor in not choosing to pay the ransom. But it's interesting because it seemed otherworldly, right? When someone's demanding Bitcoin and, but when your system's not working, they actually attacked a quarter of your computers, disabling, things from happening. That's problematic, right? And so it really you're reminded that, these systems are vulnerable, that there are bad people out there constantly looking for ways. And chaos is also partially what they want to create, right? Something that
isn't that amazing? Now let's talk. You can talk about the financial ramifications, and the, like you mentioned, systems are down, so potentially services are disrupted. And imagine it being a healthcare facility, it's all even more scary, right? But let's just talk about the impact on the organization itself. Talk about the chaos and just the sense of like, what else is going to happen or what else could happen? Let's talk about that impact, because that impact kind of leaves people, it burns them, and they carry that for a long time. I've talked to a lot of people, and I've seen firsthand how breaches just really impact people psychologically. Like, this kind of a sense of like peace of mind. Where's my peace of mind now? Am I protected? Am I safe? Right?
Yeah, no, it absolutely. Because the first thing is that it seems like surreal, right? That you can't believe that someone's attacking them, what they're requesting. The ransomware is it's very popular for people to demand money. And it's really interesting because it always begs this question, like, do you have a secure enough system that you can actually not pay the ransom? Everyone, it's like, luckily the ransom at that time wasn't a whole lot of money, but when it becomes a lot of money, I think, what was it? MGM paid a ridiculous amount of money for their ransomware attack. And so there are a lot of different policies internally that you need to have in place about how do you handle these attacks, knowing what your system looks like. So, and like I said, on our instance, we were able to use our own backups systems to restore everything. We were lucky also that no sensitive data was compromised, but it really makes you take an assessment of what you've done and really start to think about what do you need to do in the future. And these policies and procedures that you create related to cyber actually are real, right? Because it's funny, you always have to create these policies and procedures, and you think like, oh, like, you don't ever think you're going to have to use them.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the chaos comes in, because sometimes people don't have policies and procedures, and you have, okay, the first thing is like, we have people who are taking transit and need to access our transit system. Are we going to shut down the whole system? No, we're not going to shut down the whole system. So what do you do in place, right? And that's the first thing that any organization has to contemplate, like, how are our operations impacted, and how do we continue to do the core thing that we do without compromising the safety of the individuals that we're interacting with? And then you start to think about all the other things, the cost, do you have the systems, all that sort of stuff. But the first thing is like, how do we continue doing what we're doing in the short term? And I think I know some big organizations have these these simulators where they get to do that, but for smaller organizations that's not possible. But I think it's really helpful.
Are you talking about like a tabletop simulations where you can simulate?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought this up, because this is one of the things that I provide as a service. And actually, you don't have to be a big business. You can do a tabletop exercise, and even for a small enterprise, because, great. The old saying, failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
Yeah.
Even if when you have and I'm so glad you mentioned the policies and the procedures, which is where a lot of people stumble, especially for SMBs. They're like, why do I need to? But the reality is that's the evidence that the organization actually, is on top of governance, that the leadership has bought into the program, that this gives you the foundation to stand on and enact whatever else you're going to put as controls, whether it's the MFAs or of the world or backups or whatever it is. It goes back to that policy. It's your constitution. It really kind of sets the direction, and then is the execution and then the assessments and how well it's actually done. And it sounds like you've really lived in that world, and I'm really glad to hear, because most people are kind of like, oh, okay, policy. Why should I have a policy, right?
Well, and I always say to my team, I'm like, okay, we have to have a policy, but then we actually have to make sure we follow it, right? Because I think the easy part is to create these policies and procedures in a vacuum, and then
nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows where, or they just sign them, never read them.
Right, because you have approved them usually on an annual basis, right? And then you're like, move on, and then you're like, wait, did we actually do what the policy said?
Right.
And for me, it was really, because we're dealing with people in debt and their personal information and the vulnerability involved with that. Once you lose trust, right, and especially in a financial institution, like the two most compromising areas, of course, are finance and health.
Yep.
And you feel vulnerable if you're having health issues or financial issues, have that data or your personal data exposed, have greater trauma, financial theft, etc. as a consequence of it, is really challenging. And so for us, it was from day one important that we establish trust and that we not compromise people's data and information in a way that would make them any more vulnerable than they already are. Because once you lose trust, it's really hard to operate as a business. I mean, we've seen this with some other larger institutions that they've had some major cyber attacks. And not only was it that their data was compromised, but also is how they responded. And I think that's the other thing to think about. How do you provide, what does your policy statements say about how do you publicly, because it's not just the internal aspect, but how do you communicate to your partners, vendors, customers, what speed that you do it, if it's public, if it's not public, all those sort of things, because that's where you lose. Because when people don't know what is going on, then people also lose trust, right? And that's the hardest thing, because sometimes maybe you don't want to say that much, because depending on what the threat is, or if it's like a, more of a ransomware type of attack, you might want to limit what you say out there. But if you have a lot of customers that are depending on your activities and they can't access those activities, then you have to be really prepared with how to communicate that.
No, absolutely. And if we can go back a little bit to, you mentioned in your experience when you have this ransomware attack, that to some degree you were prepared, even though you didn't have simulations, but you were prepared because you did have backups. And, here we go again. This is also a policy. How often are we going to have these backups? So what's going to be the scope of these backups? Are they going to be tested? All those things that kind of go into that. In that process, who is the organization that experienced that breach, and maybe comparing it to now SMB world? Do you have a go-to, like a director or CIO or CTO or someone that kind of owns this whole program? And do you think it's possible? Is it a benefit to have someone who manages the whole piece? Because I can imagine you as a CEO would not want to be into the weeds of how to get all this done. Right?
No, and it's always been, for me, the CTO, and that's their job. They're the lead on the policies and the procedures, the training, even like doing the assessment for the cyber insurance and making sure that we have all the things that we need in place to actually to get the best policy, but also that match best standards. And I think that that's really important. And you don't have to have someone on staff all the time. If you even have a company that you work with that can do those sort of monitors for you, I think that's really critical. But you have to, like, if you don't understand this area, it's really important to have someone that does and is actually putting things in place. Sometimes there's like, some holes in your website or other systems that you have that you're not even aware of, and to have someone who can be looking
keeps
at
track of it and knows what the issues are, has a plan in place how to improve things. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So let's talk about ReMint a little bit with your current work that you do. I mean, it's been said that these days data is the lifeblood of a business, right?
Yeah.
And so I imagine you are now dealing with very little paper at all. Everything is digital.
Yes.
Like, where are you at in this digital transformation process, if you will?
So we're totally digital. In fact, the way that we get, the information from financial institutions, they upload it into our system. And like I said, it goes to data vault. So we don't have all the payments are digital. So we don't have any paper. It's actually interesting because I remember we were getting certified by a credit bureau for working with them. And they're like, oh, we have to do this camera thing and look at your office, make sure you have a locked door and the file cabinet. And I'm like, sure, but like, we don't have any paper. Like, who would ever print out someone's information and store it anywhere? So we're totally digital. And actually, it makes it much easier to access your information if you are totally digital, especially now with AI. I think like you can actually get a virtual cloud and create an LLM within your organization, so you can search your own data and information. Even with Gemini, I think that if you are on, like, say, Google, you can also use it that way. But I think it's never been easier to access your data and actually to leverage AI to identify where your holes might be. So I think in some ways it's a little easier than it's been in the past. Yeah, I think we're not going back to paper.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's actually, and it's funny because when you think about a crime policy, there's so many, when you have everything digital, there's always a footprint. And that's the advantage, even in a cyber attack. Although it's a little hard sometimes to identify who the right people are, over time, those agents, those people who are dedicated to that, they will figure out the sources of these cyber attacks. But I think when you are paper-based, then you have the whole other kind of crime, right? Anybody can copy or take pictures of
forge
or
documents.
forge,
Yeah.
right? Documents and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. It's a lot
Right.
harder to do
Right.
that in the digital world. Not
Right.
saying it's not that we don't have the other challenge of cyber
Yeah,
attacks,
absolutely.
but at
So
least that's
it probably is reasonable to say that with so much data being the lifeblood of your business, for you to not have a security program where you have the policies in place and the procedures and the tests and the training, which basically is kind of like all these different safeguards and measures and processes in place. I mean, it would be almost like unthinkable for you to be even in business if you just run amok, and you know what I mean?
we wouldn't even be able to get, I mean, especially if you're going to get for SOC 2 compliance or HIPAA or whatever, depending on your area, like if you want to get contracts with larger institutions, right? If you're an SMB, you absolutely have to have these policies in place. Even if
Yeah.
you're not dealing with super sensitive information, right? They just want to know that
Yeah.
whether it's even pricing models, whatever you deal with is not going to be subject to their competitors learning about it
Right.
and other things. So I think that cyber having a good plan in place is important. It's good business practice anyway. But
Right.
secondarily, if you want to grow your business, you basically need to have this in place because larger
Yeah.
entities that will do business won't do business with you if you don't have these things in place.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, it used to be in the days before I'm in doing technology now for about 20 years or so. And it used to be we would be so excited about a new web app or something that has all this functionality and can do this and that. And all of a sudden you realize that's not enough. Is it secure, right? Is it secure? So maybe it does all these things that you say it does, but is it secure is the big question. So it kind of like goes hand in hand with functionality. And it seems to be also in your case, you have a third-party provider that you're relying on that allows you to transfer the risk of you not having to store the data, but you have a third-party provider. And talk a little bit about tracking and reporting and like kind of being aware for you personally from where you stand.
Yeah.
What do you do? At what sequence do you get these? Like, is it reports? Is it a monthly report? Is it a quarterly report? How do you know where your risk is at? Do you have a specific person that comes to you and kind of owns all of this and picks up all this data and puts together a report? What's the mechanism that you use to?
Yeah. I mean, we have a couple different things. I mean, we have in general, because we're in a compliance oriented space, we leverage AI to kind of identify any sort of holes and gaps on a monthly basis in our communications and our work around cyber stuff and general compliance overall. Our CTO is on a regular basis as well, on more of a quarterly basis, making sure that everything's tracking with our different vendors and that like looking at systems exposures constantly and making sure that we're filling any patches. So we're really kind of, I mean, I think, the thing is, since we work directly with financial institutions, and we do really level up. I mean, one of the things like in the vendor process for an organization like ours, there's a risk assessment, right? When we work with credit unions, they have a risk assessment team. They ask us for all of our policies and procedures. Obviously, we have to have cyber coverage. And it's interesting because like the cyber coverage that's required, even though we're not even very big yet, can be as much as $5 million for a smaller organization, right?
Yep.
The risk they want to make sure that you are prepared should something happens, because it's sadly in the case of cyber, it's probably not an if, it's a when. And if you start to get real traction with larger clients or your profile starts to raise, then people do target you, right? Like they're always looking for new sources to target. So we have to, and we are vigilant because also our partners expect it from us. And, we also have a lot of compliance that's built into what we do. So it all dovetails nicely together.
And I imagine this gives you a certain level for you, particularly as an executive. It gives you a certain level of confidence going into getting a new partner or a new client. I mean, all these relationships, you're prepared. If that question comes up, you have confidence that your due diligence is in place. You're defensible. You always have, an answer. Yes, we have the compliance. Yes, we have the security. And this is such a better feeling than just feeling like, I hope nothing happens, crossing my fingers here that nothing happens. What would you say to business owners who are kind of like, there's a lot of people who are just basically saying, well, I hope it doesn't happen. I hope, just goes over me, bypasses me. Like this attorney group that I talked to years ago, and they said, well, we got breached every about 5 years, so we just paid the ransom and then we're fine. I mean, I don't know how this would be a good business practice, but what would you say to business owners who are not sure if they should take this into consideration, maybe do something about it?
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to this idea of trust. If you breach their trust, it's hard to retain that customer or that business. And so if you think it's not going to happen to you, you're wrong. It could even be a disgruntled employee or a disgruntled, customer. I mean, you just never know where it comes from. And there's some really low hanging fruit, like is it using a VPN or having a password manager? I mean, that whole idea that so many of us have 5 million passwords and they're stored sometimes just in a Google, on your phone, right? Some sort of memo is actually kind of scary, right? Anybody could.
And don't forget the yellow stickies. They're still around. They're still there.
Or something as simple as having, the fact that so many Americans and even businesses have the basic password, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever it is, or the password given to them by somebody else. Always make sure your people change your password. Force people to change their passwords. Something as simple as that can actually really aid exponentially. And I think that there's a perception that's expensive, that you have to know a lot. These are, like I said, a VPN, a password manager are super low hanging fruit. That doesn't make it very difficult to get started. And I think from there, of course, there's experts like you, because in the long run, it will save them a lot of money as you expand if you don't have those challenges. Because if you do have a ransomware attack and you have to pay it, right? Your insurance may or may not cover it if your practices were not solid.
Exactly. It's all conditional. Absolutely. All right. So as we get ready to wrap this up here, you thankfully are one of the business leaders that I personally talk to that are pretty well aware of this whole domain. What can we do as professionals, as security professionals? Sometimes, I go to these websites and they're all full of technical jargon. Do you find it easy to find easy to digest information as a business owner, or you find it like too technical and too abstract for most people? Like, what would you like us to do better? What do you think we can do better to connect with with the Gwyneths of the world who are managing all this stuff and they just want it to work, right?
Yeah, I do think it is kind of making it 1, 2, 3. This is how simple that it is. Like, I do think that so many times people get overwhelmed. You're a business owner, you have you're the CEO, the CFO, the COO. Sometimes you're all those roles, right? And I'm in a tech business, so it's unique. Obviously, I have a CTO. I recognize that most SMBs don't have CTOs. In fact, our biggest challenge with, say, for example, smaller credit unions is they don't have dedicated technical teams, right? Sometimes they're outsourced, they pay by the hour, and they don't know what they don't know. And so they are easily scared by anything that seems like it's going to take extra effort. And I think that in this area, this is one area where you can't be scared. Like you have to understand, to say, listen, I don't need to know everything, but what are the 3 things I need to do to keep my business safe? I think that that's the thing, the communications that CISO kind of professionals could provide. Like, okay, there's just these 3 things, 50 other things you could do, but these 3 things, if you do these 3 things, make it simple.
Simplify it.
And I think, one of the things that was really fun is that the module we used, and I can't remember the name of the module, for teaching our employees, for example, was this really cute, cartoon module with this evil child who wanted to go to a concert. It was really funny. You're
talking about the awareness training, like training the employees, training, and so it was fun, and people would relate to it better because it was a fun training. Okay,
and it was sort of and it took an ice cream truck and a concert, but it took things that people very much could relate to and actually get into this little evil child stealing people's information, right? But my point is that I do think that these highly technical or complicated explanations or modules are so over people's head. If you're enterprise, when I was at IBM, we had these long modules, every year that we had to do because it was IBM, right?
Right.
They're a global company. But I do think that better trainings that are really in the day-to-day that people can relate to is also very, very helpful. And just reminding people about the simple things like the spoofing of emails, the fake DocuSigns, fake Zendesk. We see, the amount of, I get phishing stuff pretty much daily, right? And and the biggest exposure actually is people mimicking the vendors and partners they already know you have, right?
Yep.
We get the fake DocuSigns, we get the fake Zendesk. because we partner with both of those on Zendesk for customer service, DocuSign for document signing.
Yep.
And it's really, and those people have gotten really good, right? Those attackers, it almost looks exactly like what you're looking for. I mean, it's pretty much
AI is actually helping them a lot.
100%. I mean, usually
you can clone a website now literally within minutes. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the thing is, and the other thing is, like, I don't know that we emphasize enough, check the email, right? It's such a simple thing that before you click on anything from someone you weren't expecting to be sending you something, especially to like just scroll over the email. Because I think so many people they see the name, right, that populates, and I don't, and the thing is, like, we're in tech, so we know this, but like, not everybody knows that I can actually create an email with anything and add your name to it. And so it would pop into my inbox showing your name, but it wouldn't be your actual email address. And I think that's the biggest way that so many people get caught, is that that the spoofing is so good. And it's just something as simple as like,
how many people do you know that Microsoft and Google's infrastructure is top? That's what the bad guys use the most, like, Outlooks and the Gmails of the world to bypass all the email filters, for example. So every time you get one of those gmail.coms, take it easy now before you click, because that might be the one, right?
Well, and especially if somebody's representing a company and all of a sudden it's a Gmail account, you're like,
Right. Now, impersonation is still big, and email really is a big vector because, let's just face it, email is not going away. I mean, today from, you go sign up, and the verification of your identity to a lot of things, to password resets, to you name it, the list is long, where email is just at the crux of the matter. And so if that's the case, you better really understand how that attack vector works and educate your people and guard the gates.
Yeah. And secondarily, and related to that, is obviously what's gotten even worse, just as bad as email, is texting, right? So many of those people are now texting, spoofing people, and asking for things, right? Like, so that's usually the gift card scam is a text scam, right? And so it's, again, people don't pay attention. It can show as that person's name, even though it's not that person really. And that's another area. And then once it gets onto your phone, it can penetrate all kinds of applications and things, and actually permanently living there. So I do think that people really have to pay attention, because the scammers are out there, and they're waiting, and they're ready, and they're getting more sophisticated every single day. I mean, there are groups in the tech world that are kind of consortiums that are actually tracking cyber criminals and sharing best practices. So that's great. But, a new cyber criminal is minting every single day, sadly.
Yeah, totally.
And so you can't, it's not an if, it's a when, really, in terms of how these things happen.
So tell me about ReMint. I see your logo is kind of cute. It has this halo over the
So I mean, it's for the redemption, right? Because we are dealing with this incident.
Got it. That's really cute, and it's for individuals. It's for just ordinary people, is from what I understand. Is that correct?
Well, so we partner with financial institutions. So we are a debt collector, right? And so the payer, I mean, yes, the financial institution pays us something, but it's really the consumer. And so we are in kind of a two-sided brand. We're a B2B2C. And so we work with financial institutions to recover delinquencies. But on the other side, we build trust with consumers and offer a pathway for them to rebuild their finances in the collections process, which is typically a process full of like fear and shame, right? Lots of people have debt. We have a really interesting, I think that the hard thing is we have a really interesting problem in this country about talking about money. We tell people not to talk about money.
Isn't it amazing? You would think we've gotten over it, but no, absolutely not.
And the underlying challenge is that not having those conversations is why. You think about all the scams that are happening, particularly to elderly people that are believing that they are giving money to the FBI or whomever, right? It's because we don't talk about money enough, and we don't talk enough about how we can keep people financially secure in that situation. And like the romance scams and all that sort of stuff, the vulnerability that you have in that space in general when it becomes money, because money equals security, right?
Yes.
And that's also what the criminals, cyber criminals are after, right? Is your money, but
Absolutely.
it also breaches your security. So, and it's interesting to be in a space that is, again, probably one of the most fundamental needs that humans have. The two things I always say that you need as a human is money and health. I'm not
Yeah.
saying you have to have a lot of money, but in order to
Yeah.
get the basic necessities done in your life, you need some degree
Absolutely.
of money. And then
Absolutely.
health is the other thing that enables you to live and to breathe. And if you have a
Yeah.
challenge with either of those, it's hard.
Absolutely. Well, Gwyneth, it's been really great talking to you and hearing your perspective and from your experiences. I certainly hope that both colleagues of mine who are in this space will listen carefully, because actually one of the things that's missing, that I'm finding missing is the voice of the business leaders and business owners, in your case, to where, we want to know from your perspective, how do you see this domain? What's lacking? What's missing? What can we do better? So I think you've given us some things to think about, some pointers here, and I appreciate you jumping on the podcast. Everybody check out ReMint. And for those of you who are wanting to take what is it? 1, 2, 3, make it 3 simple steps, right? You can check out executivesolutions.us, where we provide expert vCISO services. Like Gwyneth said, it doesn't have to cost you arm and a leg. Spend a little now, get things under control, get assessed, figure out what's going on, start plugging the holes. You are going to be much better shape than not having done anything about it. So I'm going to wrap up with that. Any last words from you, Gwyneth?
No, thank you for the opportunity to share this. I think this is an important topic, and thanks for helping SMB owners figure it out.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Gwyneth.